Former acting FBI Director Andrew McCabe argues that the president is dishonest in his new book. It's called The Threat: How the FBI Protects America in the Age of Terror and Trump.
McCabe writes, quote, "The president exposes himself as a deliberate liar, someone who will say whatever he pleases to get whatever he wishes." He also says if the president was hooked up to an FBI lie detector, he would break the machine. Former Deputy and Acting Director of the FBI, Andrew McCabe, is here with us now. Good to see you, sir.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
All right, so the title of your book is called The Threat. Do you see the president as more of a threat while he is in office, or in terms of the long-term effects he will have on the presidency and our institutions?
Well, it's really a combination of that. I think it's the way that the president conducts himself, the things that he does, the things that he says every day are having a corrosive impact, not just on the FBI, certainly on the FBI, but also on the intelligence community writ large. His relentless attacks have undermined the public's faith, our partners' faith, in the work that we do to keep this country safe, and I think that is a threat to national security.
So can we talk about some of the news of the day and some of the things that we've learned? Michael Cohen spent 7 hours being questioned publicly by lawmakers. He said a number of really interesting things, but one of the things that he brought up was that he believed the president was aware of the WikiLeaks leak, that Roger Stone and the president worked together and they knew that this thing was coming. And I wondered when you heard that, and I wondered a lot of things about how you reacted to that testimony, but when you heard that, did it sound like collusion to you? Does it sound like obstruction, or does it sound like collusion? It
certainly gets you a lot closer. And of course, I know only what he testified, the same information that the rest of us saw on TV. The challenge with a case like trying to prove a coordinated relationship between the Russian government and the Trump campaign is picking up very little pieces of conversations just like that, that would give you some insight into not just the existence of an agreement or an understanding, but also the president's intent. What did he know and how did he feel about it? I don't know that there will ever be one smoking gun piece of evidence that says, aha, this is it, we've got it now. But what you will have, possibly, is all of these small circumstantial pieces, these conversations, these mentions, emails, whatever, contacts between different players, that when you put those together and step back and look at the totality of it, it could bring a very definitive answer to that question.
I want to, and you've been asked this question often since the release of the book, but you opened this counterintelligence operation into the president in 2017. You write in the book that you have reason to believe that he could be a national security threat, even an agent of Russia. And when we were talking about that, agent of Russia, unwitting dupe or actively engaged with Russia?
So you don't know that when you're opening the case, but that's exactly why you initiate the investigation. It's important to remember that at that time, so first week or two in May 2017, we finally reached a point where we felt like the facts that we had before us gave us a clear, articulable basis to believe that a federal crime may have been committed, in this case obstruction of justice, and that a threat to national security might exist. It's not a conclusion. We don't convict anyone. We haven't thrown anyone in jail. It might, certainly that investigative effort could turn up. You could get to the end of it and say, hey, it's what we were afraid of didn't actually happen. We're good here. We close it and walk away. But at that moment, we felt obligated to investigate.
You write in the book about, some very sort of interesting scenarios, and you write at one point about in the day after, I believe it was, James Comey was fired, and you were summoned to the Oval Office, and the president wants to talk to the people of the FBI. And it's almost like a verbal arm wrestle, where he wants you to say, I would like you to come to talk to the FBI. But he's not telling you to say that. And as I was sort of going through that section, it reminded me of Michael Cohen's opening remarks, where he talked about the president saying there's no business in Russia and looking at him sort of eye to eye. When you listened to Michael Cohen's testimony, were there moments where you thought, oh man, I know exactly what that feels like?
Absolutely, absolutely. That moment was one. It took me back to that afternoon meeting in the Oval Office where the president repeatedly tried to get me to adopt his false narrative, to pick up and endorse the version of the events that he wanted me to go public with. It's something that I had seen much earlier in my work, when I was working here in New York City, investigating Russian organized crime, taping meetings between organized crime figures, listening to the orders and the direction that would be given, sometimes obliquely, sometimes in code. It was very similar to me. That is the way that the leader of a criminal enterprise conducts himself. Those leaders typically don't, come out with a to-do list and give everybody an assignment at the staff meeting. They speak in code, but they make it perfectly clear the results that they're demanding, and people get that message and go and execute it.
Staying on that topic of the language that the president uses, in all of your years of experience as an FBI agent, when Director Comey, testifying and in his book, says that President Trump, in that meeting with him, said, "I hope you can see your way clear to letting this go." Director Comey says that he took that as an order from the president. His detractors and members of the Republican Party say that's not what he's saying. He's just, having a friendly conversation with the director of the FBI. Just objectively speaking, are there two interpretations that one can draw from that?
Not reasonably.
Not reasonably.
No. The implication of what the president was requesting, demanding, ordering in that moment was absolutely clear. It was that conversation which Director Comey relayed to me shortly after he had it. I remember where I was at the time. It was that conversation that really was the watershed moment for me. I realized then that this is not just we're working with a new administration that doesn't understand how to interact with the FBI or the Department of Justice. This is an administration that is actively trying to put its thumb on the scale and direct our work, our investigations, which should be independent, direct those investigations in the way they want, which is unprecedented.
Not to sort of hammer Cohen's testimony, but hey, there were a lot of really interesting things in there.
We have a soundbite too.
While we were watching this, and we knew you were coming, we were saying, boy, I can't wait to ask him about this. So, another one of the bombshells had to do with this Trump Tower meeting. And Cohen, is actually speculating. He heard a portion of a whispered conversation, but he felt like the president, based on his observations and in hindsight, probably knew about the meeting. And then he also felt like nothing would happen to that degree without the president knowing, just knowing how he ran the campaign. Do you think the president knew about this meeting?
Well, it's hard for me to say. Two things I'll say about Michael Cohen. One is he is someone who professional investigators would refer to as a source with impeccable access. So Michael Cohen's impressions, his observations of kind of the thematics of what was happening in the room and how, in this case, President Trump typically reacted in situations like this, have the ability to be very enlightening. The second thing about Michael Cohen, of course, is he has deep problems with his own credibility.
He's a liar.
He's pled guilty to lying to Congress. So significant issues there. The prosecutors have a lot of experience working with witnesses that have problematic credibility. You prop up and strengthen their testimony and the evidence that they're prepared to provide by supporting it with corroborating evidence, documents, recordings, contemporaneous recollections that were shared with associates who can also testify. The extraordinary thing to me with Cohen's testimony was just how much of that material he referred to. So there is clearly a large volume of material that could potentially support his otherwise problematic testimony.